Let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, dearest friend, beloved God, great masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, beloved Gurudeva, Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, we bow humbly before you all. O Divine Mother, come into our hearts now. Purify us with your light. Purify us with your wisdom. Transfigure us with your love. Help us to feel your presence, Mother, in every part of our body, in all corners of our heart, and in the farthest reaches of our mind. Guide our thoughts, Mother. Inspire our hearts. Make us one with Thee. Om, peace. Amen. Well, good morning, friends. I am Keshava, and it is my great joy and privilege to get to spend this time with you. Today is the first broadcast on a topic that I'll be sharing with you every week at the same time, Wednesday mornings, on Whispers from Eternity, which is this incredible book of sacred, mystical poetry, prayer demands that Yogananda wrote. And if I remember correctly, I believe Yogananda said that he actually considered this to be a scripture, a living text of God's consciousness. And as Nayaswami Asha put in a recent talk of hers, that if I remember correctly, she said that Swamiji said that this was sort of like a handbook on right attitude. And I can't say such grand things about it because I haven't yet plumbed its depths fully. But what I can share with you is this book really started intriguing me about 1.5 years ago, because I realized that these were sacred prayer demands written by an avatar and impregnated with his divine consciousness and with the power to draw us into an experience of the divine specific to each prayer. And I thought, that sounded pretty cool. And I wanted to experience that for myself. And in the introduction to this book, Yogananda talks about how to use this text, how to use it as a spiritual gold mine for our own realization. And what he says is that inspiration is like a wet match, that we can't just read the words once and expect it to ignite a flame, but that we have to first dry the match by our concentration, by our repetition of sincerity, repeating the prayer over and over until that match has been dried. And then when we strike it against the heart of our consciousness, there it will spark and kindle a fire of great devotion for God and an experience of the divine light within us. And furthermore, he said that you have to go beyond the words in the page. That he said it so poetically. He said you have to look beyond the ink that's just impregnated onto this page. And he said, press the words like seeds until you extract the oil of divine awareness from these poems. And I started reading that introduction and I thought, okay, I'm sold. I'm in. I want to experience some of what he's talking about. And so I ran the experiment. And I took one prayer demand from this book and I prayed with it every morning and every night in my morning sadhana, my evening sadhana, and then at other points throughout the day. And I would take a single prayer very sincerely with concentration for a number of months. And I would do it There was no deadline for me or defined amount of time, but it was just I practiced the prayer until I felt like I actually had an experience of its consciousness, until it revealed to me at least a glimmer, a glimpse of Yogananda's promise inherent within it. And so I would like to share that experience with you because I found it to be very transformative for my own heart, but also it was a wonderful way of practicing attunement with our great Guru, because these are his words, these are his consciousness. And the more we can tune into them, then we become closer to his consciousness, and we can perhaps receive his thoughts, his inspirations, his feelings more clearly because of our attunement. Now, just a little aside for how I plan to pick this up is I'll be sharing some techniques I learned as an actor, actually, because when I was training as an actor and focusing my energy in that direction, it was imperative to understand text, to understand the words. Because in a play or in poetry or in a screenplay, the only thing you have to create an understanding are the words. And so it's not enough to just listen to the words or just read the words, but we had to dance with them, to really mind them, to try and understand what the consciousness was that created these words. Because words are not consciousness in and of themselves. They merely point towards that origin source of consciousness that created them in the first place. And you can think about this yourself. How many times, I know this happens to me all too frequently, that I can feel some inspiration within myself, be it something mundane that I'm trying to describe how much I enjoyed pancakes, or something more beautiful and profound that I'm trying to express to Divine Mother how much I yearn for her presence. And I can feel it, I can experience it, but it's hard to express it, isn't it? And very often when we express it, unless it's done very, very consciously, we lose some of the purity of our original experience of that consciousness. However, when a great writer puts consciousness into words, it doesn't lose some of its power, but rather it provides a roadmap back into that state of consciousness that he himself is experiencing. And so when I was an actor, we would take a text, we would take some dialogue, we would take a play, and I would sit with it, and I would meditate with it, and I would absorb it. That I would try to feel the words in my heart, beyond just their meaning, but to feel their essence in myself. So then when I went to go speak those words, it wasn't that I was just reciting dialogue or lines, but that it was a sincere expression of my heart's understanding. And this transformed acting from being a very superficial art form into being a very profound expression of human experience. And I was amazed to discover how even certain plays or material that were otherwise sort of uninspiring, if impregnated with the sincerity of the human heart, suddenly could become elevated to a greater degree. But think how much more so then that applies to some text like Whispers from Eternity, that these words contain within them the consciousness of an avatar. So what we'll be doing is we'll take one prayer demand every week, and we'll just experiment with taking one word at a time or one phrase at a time and working with that phrase, trying to understand it from all of its different facets, but not from an intellectual perspective so much as from the heart. Trying to make it our own, trying to feel that the words that are being expressed are our words, that they are the silent murmurings of our own heart. And in this way, we'll learn that these prayer demands are actually expressing the silent yearnings of our own heart just in a more clear way than perhaps we would be able to on our own. And Swami Kriyananda, I believe, said something to this effect in regard to playwriting, that he said, when you write a play, the dialogue ought to reflect a higher version of man's ability to communicate. And I'm sort of paraphrasing here, but something along the lines of that think of how you would try to say something if you were perfectly in tune with it, and there were no obstructions in your consciousness, or if you were a genius of wordsmithing, how beautifully would you like to be able to express that thought? Well, that's what this prayer demands. That's exactly what they do. As Yogananda has taken the sincere yearning of all of our hearts and has just put them onto paper in such an eloquent and uplifted way that all of us can resonate with them and discover that these prayers are in fact universal prayer demands of the soul crying out for God. And as you discover more and more that these words are your words, that these vibrations are your vibrations, it will ennoble you. It will uplift you in your own awareness of yourself, because you'll realize that you too are a child of God, yearning for your way home. So now, let's take a look at our first prayer for today. The prayer I selected was one that I took for perhaps the longest out of all of mine in my little adventure in Whispers from Eternity. And I thought that'd be a good place to start, because this prayer has given a lot to me and I think drew a lot of grace into my life. And this is number 72, O divine sculptor, chisel thou my life. So first, I'll just read this prayer demand. And so let's all sit up straight and let's focus our consciousness in our hearts. Let's open our hearts, withdrawing any blinds of resistance or tension or fear. And let's make ourselves receptive and vulnerable to these incredible words. And as I repeat this prayer, I want you to feel that these words are just the echo of your own soul yearning. So let's take a moment to get centered. And now, as I pray, silently join me with the vibrations of your own heart. Every sound that I make, let it have the vibration of thy voice. Every thought that I think, let it be saturated with the consciousness of thy presence. Let every feeling that I have glow with thy love. Let every act of my will be impregnated with thy divine vitality. Let every thought, every expression, every ambition be ornamented by thee. O divine sculptor, chisel thou my life according to thy design. Isn't that a beautiful prayer demand? And so applicable to our own hearts. That last line that summarizes the whole prayer, O divine sculptor, chisel thou my life according to thy design. I love this story of Michelangelo, I think it was, the great sculptor who sculpted David and so many other incredible statues. And actually, as an aside, I saw his sculpture of La Pietà, which is his depiction of Mother Mary holding in her arms Christ after he's been crucified. And she's holding his lifeless form, and there is a shroud over her face. And I saw it for the first time when I was in Italy when I was about 12 years old, and my heart just broke when I saw it. It had so much sweetness, so incredible. There's actually a replica of it at Forest Lawn in Los Angeles where Yogananda's body is interred. And once I discovered that, I go see it as often as I can when I visit Yogananda there, because it conveys so much beautiful devotion. But the reason I bring that up is because apparently Michelangelo, when asked, how do you sculpt stone? He said, I only remove that which isn't the statue. And that's such a fun way to think about it, because he's not creating Michael out of the stone. He's not creating Christ or Mary out of the stone. He's just revealing that form that already exists within it. He's just taking away everything that obscures that beauty, that divine consciousness. And that's exactly what this prayer demand is asking for. O divine sculptor, chisel thou my life according to thy design. Because the divine design is, of course, to reveal to us that we are all children of God for our own understanding, and that divine joy and bliss and love and wisdom are our birthright. So when we ask Divine Mother to chisel us, at first that might sound a little intimidating, because we could think, but I like this block of stone that I am. But wouldn't you like to reveal the masterpiece within? Wouldn't you like to discover that inherent perfection that's just lying under a few layers of unchipped marble? Now let's take a look at some of the first lines in this poem. Every sound that I make, let it have the vibration of thy voice. I love this prayer because it has so much divine aspiration, but also very applicable techniques for how to practice it. Every sound that I make, let it have the vibration of thy voice. That I make a lot of sound. As Shakespeare said, sound and fury signifying nothing. Well, that is the human sound when it is not resonating in harmony with the divine vibration. That it's a whole lot of noise, but it means nothing. But when we can attune ourselves to that divine voice, then suddenly flowing through our consciousness, flowing through our vibration, is the very living presence of Divine Mother. Divine Mother is that Om vibration that permeates the universe. She is within every sound. And another prayer demand that I'll pick up another time, Yogananda says, O Divine Mother, I can hear thy footsteps in the hall of creation, booming in the loud, crashing thunder and whispering in the silent murmur of atoms. That is what he's talking about when he says, let it have the vibration of thy voice. And so this prayer demand is also a technique that whenever we speak, let that sound carry the vibration of your divine beloved. And that if we offer ourselves to Divine Mother with that sincere prayer, of course she will fulfill it, if only partially due to our resistance to it. But I've got to practice this to a degree because I often sing. And now when I sing, I ask Divine Mother to flow through my voice and to manifest her divine vibration through the sound of my voice. And then when I listen to my own voice, I try to imagine that it's not my voice, but that it's Divine Mother's voice that just happens to be manifested through this little body that I'm the custodian of. And it's an ambitious thing to try and feel, but it's so beautiful when you glimpse it. And furthermore, when you begin to feel that reality, even just a glimmer of it, suddenly you'll realize that your voice contains power. Power to uplift, power to inspire, power to change the consciousness of those that you're around, to uplift your environment simply with the power of your voice. Isn't that something? Every sound that I make, let it have the vibration of thy voice. A little aside that I'd like to toss in here too is the word thy, of course, means your, but what's a beautiful thing to remember, because saying thy or thine or thou has sort of fallen out of vogue in our society today, but it was more common hundreds of years ago, and it was used to express sweetness, to express devotion, to express love. That you would say to someone, thou, if you really cared for them, or thine, if you really loved them. And you would just say you or your, if it was more casual. And so when we say these words, Yogananda, I think, is very specific, that he always refers to God using that way. He always says, let it have the vibration of thy voice, because he's trying to imbue within that very word devotion and reverence and sweetness, love. And so whenever you say that word thy, let it be an expression of your sincere heart offering to Divine Mother and to Master. And we say that so often. We say it so often when we pray. And instead of allowing it to actually create distance in our hearts because of the perceived formality, let's actually allow it to draw us closer to Divine Mother by the declaration of our love. So let's read that line again. Every sound that I make, let it have the vibration of thy voice. Every thought that I think, let it be saturated with the consciousness of thy presence. Let it be saturated with the consciousness of thy presence. Isn't that so beautiful? Yogananda doesn't mince words here. He's saying so beautifully, just feel that. What would it be to let Divine Mother's consciousness saturate your mind? Like think of a cloth saturating ink, saturating color, or being saturated with water, that it is filled. Every particle of its being is impregnated, filled, imbued with the presence of that divine grace. Just think about that for a moment. What would you feel like if every thought that you had was saturated with the presence of Divine Mother's love? So let's read those two lines together. Every sound that I make, let it have the vibration of thy voice. Every thought that I think, let it be saturated with the consciousness of thy presence. Let every feeling that I have glow with thy love. Isn't that a beautiful phrase? Let every feeling that I have glow with thy love. Just imagine, close your eyes for a moment and imagine an ember of Divine Mother's love glowing in your heart. And that every feeling that you have is like the puff of a blacksmith's bellows that just encourages that ember to glow a little more brightly, with a little more energy, with a little more power. And that every time it glows brighter, it is melting away the dross of your heart. Let every feeling that I have glow with thy love. Isn't that incredible? Until that glow of Divine Mother's love bursts into flames and will consume all of our heart's dross. Let every act of my will be impregnated with thy divine vitality. Imagine being able to actually feel your will coursing through you. First, being conscious of willpower itself, of divine energy itself, but then feeling that that will coursing through you carries with it the divine potential of Divine Mother's consciousness. And that whatever you do is impregnated with that vitality, with that eternal power that will never be lost, that will never be destroyed by the tests of time. Let every act of my will be impregnated with thy divine vitality. Divine vitality, what is that experience? I think I have had a glimmer of divine vitality when I practiced energization 6 times a day for 13 months. I think I had an experience a few times of what divine vitality felt like. And when you experience that divine vitality, to me it felt like every particle of my body was humming with divine potential, with divine power. That there was like a great party happening in every atom of my little body, and it was humming with the presence of Divine Mother's power, just yearning to transform me. And at that time, I felt that I could conquer anything, that any darkness within me had better start running because it stood no chance compared to that divine vitality within me. It was such a dynamic time because really, I would wake up in the morning and would like crack my knuckles and flex my inner muscles waiting for the next obstacle to present itself, because I could devour them with Divine Mother's vitality that I had received. Let every act of my will be impregnated with thy divine vitality. This prayer is asking that you be filled in body, mind, and soul with endless energy, endless vitality, perfect joy constantly. Let every thought, every expression, every ambition be ornamented by thee. That we're saying, Lord, I don't want any part of my life, any part of my heart to not have your signature upon it. I want you to be my constant companion in everything. O divine sculptor, chisel thou my life according to thy design. And by offering the sound that we make, the thoughts that we think, the feelings that we have, the will that we direct, the thought, the expressions, our ambitions, all to God, we give the chisel to the Lord and we say, O divine sculptor, chisel thou my life according to thy design. God bless you, and I hope you enjoy this prayer demand. Om.